So I finished Antlers today. Well, that was heavy. Okay, you guys, it didn't take me as long as I thought it was going to take to finish this movie. It's not a very long movie. It's only about an hour and 35 to 39 minutes. But I thought it was going to take me a bit to get started on it. It didn't. I watched it over the course of, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 days. And part of the reason why it took me that long, I could have completed it sooner, was because a lot of times I would sit down and I would start watching it before I was ready to go to bed or something like that. And I would get to certain moments in this movie and I would say to myself, I might have trouble getting my mind shut off if I continue to watch more of this. So I'm going to stop it now where it looks like a safe stopping point. Anyway, Antlers. This was a movie that was produced by Guillermo Del Toro. I cannot remember the director's name, but I looked up his previous works, and he had done The Pale Blue Eye, which I watched earlier this year. I actually like that movie. It's okay. It's not something super astounding, but I enjoyed it. Very atmospheric. I just didn't do a review of it. He also did Black Mass and Hostels, as well as Out of the Furnace. I've seen Hostels and Out of the Furnace, have not seen Black Mass. So he's a competent director, in my opinion, and I felt like in this particular movie, he did a pretty solid job as well. It was very atmospheric, very dark. There were hardly any there were pretty much no moments of levity, no moments of lightness, except for maybe one scene where the character played by Keri Russell is interacting with the character of Lucas. They're eating ice cream together. That's a brief moment of, I don't know. It's hard to even describe because this movie just as a whole, it's just so oppressive. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's heavy. Like I said, it deals with it deals with pretty terrible themes like abuse and trauma, guilt, addiction, greed, according to the lore of the Wendigo, which this is a movie about a Wendigo. And I felt like it was the creature, once we get to see more and more of the creature, I felt like it was really interesting and very well done. From what I understand, this was a mixture of practical and CGI effects, and I thought it was convincing to the point that I didn't really, there was a part where you could tell it's CGI. It was not anything that intruded or messed up the scene or anything like that. I was just trying to go back in my brain and think, well, did it even seem like it was CGI? Because to me, it really didn't. Maybe I was just so into it. Maybe if I studied it more closely, I could pick up on more of the CGI elements, but it blended well. I thought they did a really good job with that. Some other standouts about this movie. The actor, this kid, I think his name is Jeremy T. Thomas. Oh my gosh, his performance was so moving and at the same time chilling. And you will know what I'm talking about if you watch it. If you've seen it already, you probably know exactly what I mean because of the situation that he's in and the loyalty that he feels to the members of his family that he has left. His mother has passed away, apparently. He has his father, who's running a meth business, and his little brother. And something happens to his father and his brother, and this kid is having to deal with the fallout of that, or the ramifications of what has occurred. It shows what happens at the very beginning, and then you pick up later, it shows Keri Russell, and she has just come back into this town that she grew up in. She had left the town because her father was abusive in more ways than one. And so she left town and she left her brother behind when she did. And she feels a lot of guilt for that. In addition to the trauma of the abuse that she suffered, she still carries a lot of guilt for leaving her brother behind when she split. Her brother's played by Jesse Plemons. And you know, he was probably one of, if not my favorite character in here. Now, the very first time I noticed him as an actor was in Jungle Cruise. He played like the German dude or something. And I was like, I didn't like his character. So it was like his performance didn't really strike me in an overwhelmingly positive way. Maybe that was just, like I said, how I felt about his character. I honestly, I do not know, because I know that I've seen actors play characters that were absolutely terrible, but I really enjoyed their performance. But in Jungle Cruise, he just didn't, it didn't do much for me. Maybe it was just the movie in itself. But in this film, and I've seen him in some other things since then, but in this film, I just really liked his character. I liked his countenance. I liked the way he interacted with his sister. He was the calm voice of reason, and yet he could tell that he was getting in very over his head with the situations that were going on, because these killings start happening. They're finding ripped apart bodies, and he does not understand what's going on. Keri Russell, in the meantime, she has noticed that Lucas, this is a boy in her class, she's like a teacher, she can pick up on the signs of abuse because of her history with it. She recognizes the signs in other people, and so she tries to help this kid. Then there's, like I said, these bodies are being discovered, and they go at some point and they talk to Graham Greene. He used to be the sheriff there, and he's Native American, and he tells them about the mythology, or what's the word I'm looking for? The history of the Wendigo in Native American culture. And I know of the Wendigo, and I sort of have these abstract understandings here and there of what it means. It's supposed to be a metaphor for different things. I've heard it described as a metaphor for addiction, greed, the destruction of our natural resources, and all of that. So to that end, there's a lot of depth that can be found in this film. This isn't just a superficial throwaway type of horror movie, in my opinion. I think there's all these different messages that are in here, and they're subtle. You could go into this and you could appreciate it as, oh, this creature feature. It's a creature movie, this horror. Or you could go into it as, yeah, that's part of it, but that's just like this outlying thing that's happening. At its core, this is a character drama that deals with various deep, sobering, important themes. And this Wendigo is just more of a metaphor for those themes. And so they take that, they wrap it all up in this horror movie. And I appreciated what they were doing with it. I don't really have too many cons, honestly. There were so many things that I enjoyed about it more than I disliked about it. And I'll touch back on some more of that. I liked the contrast between Jesse Plemons' character and Keri Russell's character. For a bit, I was kind of turned off by Keri Russell's character at different moments in the film, because they had both suffered abuse at the hand of their father. Jesse's character seemed like he was trying to move past it, to better himself, and not to let that past trauma weigh him down. Keri Russell, in contrast, it was weighing her down. She couldn't let it go. And that's not to say that, when you've suffered horrific abuse, you can just let it go. But what I mean is, that's always going to be with you. But as I've mentioned before, being able to move beyond those awful experiences of your past and not letting that hold you back and weigh you down and turn you into something that's twisted and awful. Horrible childhoods are almost always at the core of terrible things that people have done, like terrible crimes that we've heard about being committed, like mass events and serial killers and stuff like that. So he represented to me two different types of people. Not that Keri Russell was bad or was doing bad things, but she was like this type of person that was just so bogged down by her past, and a recovering alcoholic. It was a real struggle for her. And Jesse Plemons, he seemed like he was just trying to go forward with his life. Maybe that's a better way to describe it, as opposed to let it go or just forget about it. He was trying to move forward, and she was having trouble with that. And so they would have these interactions with each other, and the pain of that past would come up between them. And I didn't appreciate how she would treat him sometimes. It got under my skin, but she's also dealing with a lot of guilt. As I mentioned, she feels guilty about leaving him behind. So there's just all of this. There's so much depth to these characters. There's really no character in here that feels like a superficial cookie cutter throwaway character. Even Graham Greene's character, he's not in here very much. Amy Madigan, she's not in here very much, but they both do a really good job at portraying the characters. I was watching a review about this movie before I filmed my own because I have so many thoughts swirling around in my brain about it. I felt like I just wouldn't have adequate words to describe how it made me feel. But someone in the review was saying how children can make or break a movie. And when I heard him say that, it made me think of something I had said in a recent movie review. It was the one for Haunted Mansion. And I talked about how one of the weakest points of that movie, one of the things I disliked the most was the performance of the child actor in there. I did not think he did a good job. He snapped me right out of the moment almost every time he was on screen. And in contrast, this movie, the two child actors in here, I thought they were actual brothers. They favor each other. Anyway, the older brother, younger brother, they both were so good. And I've already mentioned how good the main little boy is, but I was super, super impressed with both of these kids. And also the guy who plays his father. So like he's this meth dealer. So you'd be like, he's this meth dealer. He's just, so who cares about him? He's a piece of trash and whatever. And that's definitely a subject that can be talked about in further detail elsewhere. But something that I liked what they did with his character is he wasn't just a meth dealer. He was a father. And throughout the course of the movie, even in the beginning, and then also as things progressed and got worse and worse and worse, you could still see this humanity in him and the love that he had for his children in trying very hard to protect his children from what he knew was to come. And I thought that was really well done. And I appreciated that they just didn't make him this awful character that you just would hate or whatever, but that they gave him this level of realism and depth that made him an interesting and sympathetic character. So many of the characters in here, well, pretty much almost all of the characters in here were sympathetic people. Like you just felt very bad for them. And I wanted the best for all of them. And I wanted a happy ending for all of them. And well, this is horror. So be prepared for that part of it. Oh, something else that I liked. I think, did I mention? I started to touch on it about the creature. I like that they keep the creature hidden a lot. Like you don't see the creature just full on in all its glory. It's kept in shadows. That heightens the sense of dread and the fear factor associated with just the horror element of this scary monster creature. I thought they did a really good job with that. You do, as the movie goes on, you do see more and more, but it's not something that lingers terribly long on it. Because, sometimes in these types of movies, the more you see of the creature, well, number one, the less scary it gets. And number two, you start to notice how awful it looks. And that was just not the case with this movie. So I appreciated that as well. In addition to that, it held off on showing you. Like you don't start off right away seeing this creature. So you don't have that overkill element, no pun intended, of too much in your face with this thing. So I just thought that was balanced very well. Now I'm going to move on to the cons. I didn't write many, honestly. I have 3 written down. One of the things was the typical thing that happens in so many horror movies, a person venturing into a dark and scary house. Why? Don't do that. Now, one of the characters in here made the decision not to because they very appropriately picked up on the fact that something was not right in this house and they left. They were like, nope, another character goes there. They can pick up something's not right in the house. House is dark and scary. There's these weird noises. Person continues to go in the house. Well, you know what's going to happen when this occurs. And the thing is, I knew this was going to happen, and I knew this had to happen because it was part of the story. But the setup, I did not like that this character did the same doggone thing that characters do so many times in a horror movie. And, no, don't go in the dark, scary house. And they go in the dark, scary house. That was aggravating. Another thing that I wrote down in the con category was that they do touch on the mythology of the Wendigo, but they really don't go a whole lot deeper into it. You see some stuff these things in this mine area that have been hung up, I guess, as sort of like, what was it they called it? To keep the bad thing away, those sorts of things that were hanging up. And then they have the discussion with Graham Greene. So he tells of the mythology of the Wendigo. But other than that, it really doesn't go as deeply into the Wendigo mythology as I was thinking that it was going to. Like, yeah, it's about a Wendigo, and there's this mythology associated with it. But that's kind of down, that's kind of like way below the fact that this is a family drama disguised as a creature feature, as another reviewer put it. And I felt like maybe we could have delved into that a little bit more, gotten Graham Greene's character involved a little bit more. I mean, he came in at the moments when it was appropriate with regard to the mythology of the Wendigo and the stuff that he was seeing at these different crime scenes and what he was saying to them during their discussion. But it felt like he was just a tad underutilized. And then the last thing that I wrote down as a con, kind of an unanswered question, and maybe it doesn't matter, maybe it's not supposed to be a question that there's an answer to, but there's this thing that happens in the beginning, and it involves a Wendigo. We never know what happened to that other one. Don't know. Is part of the mythology that once it does its thing, it's moved on to another person. Something that I was a little confused about with the Wendigo, and maybe it's just because I wasn't thinking deeply enough about it, but there have been different videos I was watching, and people were really going deep into all the different things that this means, like when the Wendigo infects somebody. I typically, well, when I was watching it, I was viewing it, well, this person got attacked, so they're going to be infected. But other people were talking about how, no, it's this malevolent spirit and it attaches itself to people who are weak, whether weak by disease or weak by something emotional or mentally or whatever. So I don't know. I didn't look at it that way at all. But that might just be because I don't really understand as completely as maybe I should about the whole mythology of this. So that might not really be something that's a con, or maybe it's just my lack of full appreciation for the stuff about the Wendigo. As far as Wendigo stories or movies or whatever, I feel like this was one of the better ones. I've seen a couple or few. I remember there was a Wendigo movie I watched a while ago, long time ago. It had the guy who played in the show Medium as the husband. And I remember I wasn't super crazy about that one. I don't know if I would go back and rewatch it, if I would have a new appreciation for it after having seen this and knowing a little bit more about Wendigos. Because I used to just think they were kind of like werewolves or whatever, but they're not. They're totally not. But I really liked this one. And I think that fans of creature horror would appreciate this as well. It's not something that's bright and cheerful. Obviously, you can tell by the trailer. So I think maybe you might have to be in a certain mood to watch something like this. Because this movie was the latest one that I put in my movie poll and it won, that's why I watched it. If I had to choose between this and other movies to, figure out what I wanted to watch, I might not watch this one because I knew that this was going to be dark and depressing. But the movie poll kind of forced me to watch it. So I do now have it under my belt. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I was able to see it. And I expected that I was going to utterly hate the ending. While the ending is pretty much an extension of the overall tone of the entire movie, the ending felt appropriate. It wasn't something that completely caught me by surprise or anything like that. I don't think I have anything else beyond that. I remember watching the trailer for this quite a while ago. I think I may have even done a reaction to it. I'm recording. Okay. What was I saying? I was saying a couple years ago or so, I remember watching the trailer for this. It was probably more than a couple years ago because this movie came out in 2021. And I'm pretty sure I filmed a reaction to it. And when it came to theaters, it wasn't in theaters very long in my area. I never got around to watching it on the big screen. I really wish I had, because I feel like this would have been worth the experience just for the cinematography. I mean, the scenery, as depressing as it looked, the cinematography and the scenery, the landscape was still very pleasing to the eye. And I think that would have been something that I would have appreciated watching on a much bigger screen than just my laptop. So yeah, I can't think of anything else to add. If you guys have seen this movie, what did you think about it? It doesn't have the highest ratings. I think on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score is about 60-something%. I think I can see why that would be, just because of the overall tone. I don't know. But if you guys didn't like it, what were the weak points about it? And if you did enjoy it, what did you like about it? Yeah, I think that's it. I'll do another movie poll soon, because this does motivate me to watch things much more quickly than I would probably watch them if left to my own devices. Okay, you guys, I don't have anything else. I'm wrapping this up. Later.